What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to All Sports Talk with Peter Burtnett. The NFL season has come to a close, and we now have the playoffs to look forward to. Matchups are set. Times have yet to be announced. I'll throw that up on the screen when I get this video up. I'm recording this literally seconds, a minute after the Detroit Lions stunned the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. And so I want to start this episode by wrapping up Week 18 of the regular season, and by starting with where it all started this week, with the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Las Vegas Raiders. With that win, they wrapped up the 1 seed. Obviously, I touched on this in the last video, but they would not have home field advantage against the Bills, or I believe potentially even the Bengals if they did match up against the Bengals. But they do at least have a bye week during Wild Card weekend and will play the divisional round at home. And then over in the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles had a little bit of a tougher test against the New York Giants, already a playoff team locked in at the number 6 seed. Were able to hold on for a 22-16 victory. Jalen Hurts was back. He finished with the stat line. He was 20 for 35, 229 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. So not a great stat line, but Eagles fans just have to be happy that Jalen Hurts is back. And for the Eagles, the NFC, all the way to the Super Bowl, will run through the city of brotherly love. And so definitely a huge win for the Eagles to be able to wrap up, hold on for that victory over the Giants. Now, switching gears back over to the AFC, the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, the story surrounding them with what happened with Damar Hamlin on Monday Night Football, praise God that he's doing better. Still not out of the woods yet, but doing a lot better, so that's really amazing to see. And the storybook week that's followed since then, everybody just kind of coming alongside the Bills, wishing their support for Damar Hamlin, continued right at the beginning of the game against the New England Patriots. Nyheim Hines returns the opening kickoff for a touchdown, gets kind of the momentum started early for the Bills. Patriots fought back. I think they even took the lead at one point, but then started the second half. Hines once again took the kickoff back for a touchdown, and that gave the Bills pretty much a comfortable lead, and they were able to see out a 35-23 win, which not only locked up the number 2 seed for them, it also eliminated the New England Patriots from playoff contention. And then the other team in that division with the Patriots and the Bills is the Miami Dolphins. They were playing the Jets, who were also already out of the playoffs. Certainly, I want to give a shout out to what the Jets have been able to do this season. A phenomenal season for Robert Saleh at the helm, for what he's been able to do with that defense and getting Zach Wilson to do enough to win games. And Garrett Wilson, also big time wide receiver out of the Ohio State University, had a huge season. Him and Chris Olave, one other storyline. I think the first rookie receivers certainly out of the same college, first rookie wide receivers out of the same college to record 1,000 receiving yards. So huge seasons to start their NFL careers for those guys. But the Dolphins really had to fight for a win over the Jets. It was an ugly offensive game. The Dolphins had Skylar Thompson at quarterback. Tua still dealing with, I think the concussion symptoms. I think he had to, if he could even watch the game or maybe even just listen to it, from a dark room in the bowels of Hard Rock Stadium. I did see a picture though. I think he came out like right when the game was going final and was able at least to see that. So the Dolphins were able to get that win. It finished 11-6. They got a game-winning field goal and then a kind of crazy lateral situation with the safety after the game-winning field goal. And so that knocked out the Steelers, who unfortunately were able to beat my Cleveland Browns. But that was the situation there at the bottom of the conference. And then rounding out the AFC, a lot of these were already locked up. The Cincinnati Bengals at 3, the Chargers at 5, and the Ravens at 6. No, I didn't miss the Jacksonville Jaguars. I wanted to touch on that a little bit more in depth. The Jaguars Also defensive struggle, not quite as, there were more points put on the board, but a huge fumble forced by Rayshawn Jenkins and return for a touchdown by Josh Allen late in the Saturday night game. Jacksonville at home in Duval, able to wrap up a huge win over the Titans to not only finish one of the best turnarounds in NFL history, going from two wins last year, all the controversy and just storm that surrounded Urban Meyer, turned it around and got the job done and won the AFC South with that win over the Titans. We'll take a look at some of the matchups in a little bit after I go over the NFC. In the NFC, the 49ers and the Vikings both got pretty easy wins today, for the Niners over Arizona, and then for the Vikings over the Bears, which is another interesting storyline. The Chicago Bears, going into the day, it looked like the Texans would be locked in for the number one pick. The Bears, I think, were expected to lose as well, and the Texans, they certainly weren't playing any world beaters. They were playing one of the disappointments of the season, the Indianapolis Colts. The Texans get a late touchdown. They were ahead for most of the game, and then they fall behind, and then they come back late, get a touchdown. They convert a big fourth down to set up the touchdown, and convert a two-point conversion to come away with a 32-31 win, which still resulted in Lovie Smith getting fired, and also handed the number one overall pick to the Chicago Bears. So Justin Fields will be getting some help probably. I would assume they go with an offensive lineman. That'll be something to look at more in depth when we get closer to draft time. But certainly an interesting situation there. But continuing, you got Philadelphia at 1, San Francisco at 2, and Minnesota at 3. You got the Buccaneers at 4, the worst record of any playoff team, 8-9. But again, Tom Brady, whether it's benefiting for some breaks or the fact that he is the greatest quarterback, the greatest football player of all time, probably a mix of both this season. To be able to finish 8-9 and still make the playoffs, but. Brady is just one of those guys. There are coaches, Bill Belichick, even kind of Pete Carroll to a lesser extent, Mike Tomlin. There are guys in the NFL that just tend to get their teams there by any means necessary. The Dallas Cowboys had a really bad loss, especially offensively, 26-6 to the Washington Commanders today. So not the end of the season they wanted. They couldn't have won the division anyways because of the Eagles win. But not a great way to wrap up the season. At the 6th spot is the Giants, finishing 9-7-1. Kind of similar. It was a good season for the teams in East Rutherford, New Jersey. A good turnaround for both teams. Even more positively so for the Giants, obviously getting into the playoffs. And Daniel Jones has established himself as a starter there. And Kenny Golladay, has the wide receiver for the Giants, has had a lot of, criticism geared toward him, and some of it deservedly so. He hadn't had a touchdown this entire season. He was, a big acquisition for them recently, and really hadn't been able to do anything. But finally was able to get a touchdown. So we'll see. He's a talented receiver. He's definitely, taken some blows to his reputation and everything on the field. But maybe it's something that he can use as they go into a playoff game. And then rounding it out, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning of this episode, the Seattle Seahawks will be in as the 7 seed because of the Packers losing to the Lions. I want to start with those two teams because they played each other, obviously. First of all, what an incredible season for the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell leading the Lions in his second year there in Detroit. Their last winning season was in 2017. They started this season 1-6 and looked like they were heading for another, like at best 4-win season. Over those 4 seasons, 2018 through 2021, they averaged about 4 wins a season. So it looked like they were headed for another one of those. But a huge turnaround. You got the defense playing at an unbelievable level, and kind of unexpectedly maybe for some, I mean, especially on the outside, the offense really played phenomenally the whole season. You've got Jamal Williams on the ground. You've got Jared Goff throwing to Amon-Ra St. Brown and the rest of their receiving unit. But a big turnaround for the Lions. Obviously, it must hurt for people who are Lions fans. Shout out a good friend of mine, Joe. But still, a lot of positives to take from this season. 9-8. You beat the Packers at Lambeau. You beat Aaron Rodgers on his home field to close the regular season. So a lot of positives to take into the future. And you go 8-2 down the stretch. That's pretty phenomenal. And then flip side of that, 3 interceptions for Rodgers. Didn't play his best game when he needed to, like he normally does, at least during the regular season. And that knocked the Packers out of the playoffs with that loss, and it benefited Seattle, who had earlier in the day, similarly to Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Miami, the Dolphins versus the Jets, had to really fight out, scratch and claw, fight for a win, and they were able to earn it. There was a doink off the upright at the end of regulation that could have won the game, but it didn't. They were able to pick off Baker Mayfield from the Los Angeles Rams. That still feels weird to say, Baker Mayfield for the Rams. But really the story for the Seahawks this season has been the play of Geno Smith. He's set franchise records this season for completion percentage in a single season of 69.8%, which also led the entire NFL. So a great season accuracy-wise for Geno Smith. And then also passing yards, 4,282, completions and attempts, 399 for 572, all Seahawks single-season records. So a really incredible season for Geno Smith out in Seattle. Now, moving into those playoff matchups, and let's start with the team that we finished with. Let's start with Seattle against San Francisco. Both games this season ended in 49ers wins. The game early in the season, I think it was week 2 or 3, the Niners won easily, 27-7. Obviously, the passing game has been a little bit more heavily leaned upon, which is a little bit odd for a Seahawks Pete Carroll coach team. But when you have receivers like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and a quarterback like how Geno Smith has played this season, it makes sense. But they were held to 36 rushing yards in that early season loss. Even if you have a good passing game, you can't normally be held under, I would say, 50, maybe. Maybe you can get, right around 50 and still win a game if you get a lot of passing yards or force turnovers. And then the second game, it was 21-13, a little bit closer. They got 70 rushing yards. So that, for me, will be the key area to watch. And then, the quarterback battle in this one is, if you would have told me about this before the season, that Brock Purdy would be facing off against Geno Smith in the wild card round of the playoffs, I would have questioned your sanity. And that's not a knock on either one of those guys, but let's just be honest. Neither one, Purdy is a young, unproven. The talking once he started coming in, Mr. Irrelevant. And then Geno Smith hasn't, he's had his ups kind of, but really a bunch of downs in his NFL career. But both of those guys have proven the doubters wrong. I already mentioned some of Geno's numbers, but Purdy, since he's come in, 67% completion percentage, 1,374 yards, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So surprisingly, it should be a good quarterback matchup between the Niners and Seahawks in Santa Clara at Levi's Stadium. Moving ahead to the next matchup, the 6-3, you've got the Giants at the Vikings. Those teams just played a couple of weeks ago on Christmas Eve. It was a solid battle between the teams. It went down to the wire. The Vikings had to kind of get a little bit of a turnaround. They forced two Giants turnovers, one I was looking at something else. The Giants outgained the Vikings, but the 2 turnovers proved costly, and Greg Joseph nailed a 61-yard field goal that, if I remember correctly from watching, probably would have been clear from a few yards more as well. So looking at that game, hopefully, as a neutral NFL fan, it'll be a close competitive game once again. Vikings have the edge that it's at home, but the Giants have put together obviously a great season. Brian Daboll at the helm, a good season for the Giants, and it'd be an even better cap to the season if they're able to shock the Vikings in Minneapolis. The final game is between the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. This one, Week 1, the teams faced off. I think it was Sunday Night Football. The Buccaneers won 19-3. Dallas had 3 turnovers on downs in the game. I think they probably were close to, if not outgained, the Buccaneers in that game, but still couldn't really get much going on offense. So it'll be interesting to see what that matchup looks like. Obviously, the Cowboys, I guess before today's game against the Commanders, looked to be the stronger team, not just record-wise, but the product they put on the field. But that honestly might kind of be the stinker out of this one, out of the NFC. But shifting gears over the AFC, which has a very divisional flavor to it. The NFC, you've got one divisional matchup, but in the AFC, you have Buffalo against Miami. Those teams actually split both of their meetings. The butt punt is what happened in the first game between the two teams. The Dolphins were still able to grab a victory in that one. And then the Bills mounted, I think, if not double digits, it was like 8 or 9 point comeback in the fourth quarter, and were able to win that meeting between the two teams. I think the big question mark here, like the next game I'm going to talk about actually, is the health of Tua Tagovailoa, and whether or not he can play will be huge. Going up against the Bills, who are obviously playing inspired football now, playing for Damar Hamlin, and continually putting up big offensive numbers. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, the 2 main players, and it should be a tough game for the Dolphins going to Buffalo. That was obviously where they lost that fourth quarter game, and actually they played pretty well, considering going all the weather talk before that game about how cold it was going to be in the challenge. But I think the Bills probably have the advantage there being at home, and probably have the better team, and especially if Tua can't play, I think the Dolphins are really in trouble. Similarly, the Ravens, if they continue to be without Lamar Jackson, I think they definitely are in trouble. Those teams, they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals. They both split in their division matchups. Defensive battle in the first one was won 19-17, I think week 3 of the regular season, by the Ravens. And then Cincinnati, they actually just played. This is the most recent matchup between any teams. They literally finished the regular season against each other. The Bengals didn't really have much trouble winning 27-16 at home, obviously avoiding that kind of controversial coin flip that would have decided who hosted who, or who won the division, if the Ravens had won on Sunday. So that's the matchup there. Against very similar situation. I think if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, I'd be hard-pressed to pick the Ravens to win that one. But if he does play, and the Ravens defense is able to limit Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine and the rest of that offense, then I think the Ravens definitely have a shot to win that game. And I would actually probably go with an upset there, if only because I've picked mostly home teams, and just going back, I will pick the games. I might not give a score, but I'll at least give who I think will win after I go over this final matchup, which is the Chargers at Jacksonville. These teams did play once early in the season. This is the one I was thinking about earlier, with a fumble returned for a touchdown. The Jaguars defense, which has been phenomenal, again, as they showed against the Titans. They forced 2 turnovers. Again, one of those returned for a touchdown and absolutely dominated the Chargers. Just shut down Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler and the rest of that at times high-powered offense. Although the one observation that I have about the Chargers is they seem to be very hit or miss. They can have a game like that against the Jaguars where they only put up 10 points, or they can have games where they're putting up 30, 40 points. And going on the road in Jacksonville will be very tough, and they're coming off a loss to Denver, potentially losing Mike Williams. Early news on that, back injury. It didn't look good. He had to be carted off the field. But I guess the early outlook for that is he's not for sure out for next week. It's possible he could come back in and play the Chargers wide receiver. And so starting with the predictions for this wild card round, I'm going to start with that one, Chargers at Jaguars. I'm going to go with Jacksonville's defense stepping up once again. They have momentum on defense. They have momentum as a team. They're winning games. I think Jaguars win somewhere in the ballpark of similar to the win over the Titans, somewhere around, I'm going to go 23-17. Going to the 3 versus 6 Bengals-Ravens game. I'll make a call, but it really does hinge on Lamar Jackson's status. I think maybe even if he does play, he's still affected by his ankle sprain injury. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals do benefit from home field, and I hate to just pick home teams here, but I think they have the advantage at home and win 27-23. And then Buffalo versus Miami. Again, similarly, if Tua plays, it's more competitive. Last time they played in Buffalo, 32-29, the Bills won on a game-winning field goal. I think this one is a little bit more separated. I think Bills 35, Dolphins 20. Shifting gears over back to the NFC, looking first at San Francisco versus Seattle. Again, the Niners have won both games already. It is difficult, though, to beat a team 3 times in a season. There's been plenty of times where divisional opponents face off again in the playoffs. But looking at how Purdy is playing, he's poised and he's making the right plays. And I mean, he has obviously a lot of help. You've got Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. I mean, that offense, if they don't win this game, it'd be a disappointment. At the same time, they're going to have to defend against the pass, and it will, I think, be a competitive game. I see it being a lot closer to the more recent game that was 21-13. I think it's a little bit higher scoring just because both of these offenses have been playing really well as of late. Maybe not really well. 19 points in an overtime win over the Rams for Seattle in their last game isn't great, but I think this one is a little bit more higher scoring than the previous 2 matchups, and I'll go with 35-31 San Francisco in this one. The next game, I'm going to go with the first upset here because I think at times, kind of similar to the Chargers, they have a better record, obviously. They've gotten the wins that they need to, but I think their point differential isn't really that high. I think the Vikings have been, hit or miss at times, and I think the Giants are able to bounce back. They showed that they can play with these top 3 NFC teams with how they faced with how they played against the Eagles. I think they carry that over, and I think they pull one of 2 road wins in the wild card round. And the second one, you never want to doubt Tom Brady, but the Buccaneers have just looked so out of it. Like they're one of those teams that I haven't even really honestly paid that much attention to because they're just to watch. And while the Cowboys were like that today on Sunday against Washington, I think they have a stronger offense. I think they have a stronger defense with Micah Parsons leading the way, and I think the Cowboys win this one. I'm going to go with 28-13 13. And so that's it for my predictions and the breakdown earlier. Again, I've got Bills, Bengals, Jacksonville, San Francisco, the Giants, and the Cowboys winning their wild card rounds, which would set up Giants at Eagles, again, another division matchup in the divisional round, and then Cowboys at 49ers, which obviously has a lot of history behind that. And then in the AFC, I've got Jacksonville at Kansas City. That's an interesting matchup, and probably a pretty easy win for Kansas City, looking a little bit further ahead. And then Cincinnati at Buffalo. That one, so much would surround that one. I'm not sure if the NFL has looked at that one being on a neutral site as well, but obviously the game that had so much hype going into it on Monday night last week and obviously was horrifically cut short. Thankfully, so much good has come out of a bad situation with the Damar Hamlin, situation, and again, wish nothing but the best for him in his continued recovery. But that's my quick rundown of Week 18 and kind of a look ahead at the playoff matchups. Let me know in the comments which one of those playoff matchups you're most looking forward to. Let me know what you think some of the key matchups are, and whether I get some comments or not, I might take a deeper dive into specific matchups I am looking out for in both of those games later this week. Forgot to record this in the main episode, but I just wanted to give a shout out to J.J. Watt for what's been an incredible career. Obviously, he retired after the Arizona Cardinals regular season finale loss to the San Francisco 49ers, but it's been an unbelievable career for J.J. Watt, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He had several seasons a couple of seasons especially, where he had 20.5 sacks, and just put up so many incredible numbers over the years. And I know he said from watching Hard Knocks that he wanted to retire when he was at the top of his game, and he seems to be doing that. He was healthy, throughout the entire season really this year, and had a great year. And it's sad to see him go, because he's again had such an incredible career, so many highlights in his career. Obviously, unfortunately for him, no Super Bowl ring. That's probably about the only bad takeaway for J.J. Watt, but congratulations to him on a phenomenal career, and it's been a joy to be able to watch him play. But if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more all sports talk content, please subscribe to the channel. I've got a special video coming up, potentially in the next couple of days. I said it's all sports all the time, and I want to, stick to that promise. So I'm going to be doing a special international football episode. I'm going to be talking a little bit of La Liga, a little bit of FA Cup, which just has gone through most of the third round, England's big cup tournament that has been around for 150 years or something crazy like that. And then also looking ahead to this weekend with a couple of huge derbies, which are local rivalries for those who don't know the lingo, and one other big matchup, actually a couple of other big matchups between teams in the top 10 of the Premier League right now. But that's it for this episode. Again, if you've enjoyed, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. And that's all for All Sports Talk. This is episode 4, and I'm Peter Burtnett signing out. Peace.